during that campaign, it seemed, at least to me, that Obama supported the war in Afghanistan in part out of strategy. He couldn't seem too much of a peacenik. He had to, as he said in his earlier speech, that he didn't oppose all wars, just dumb wars. But since he took office, he's really taken ownership of this war, and he's escalated. And I was wondering if you were surprised by that, and given that he seems to be a pretty realistic guy, what you think he's hoping to accomplish.
Well, first of all, I begin by saying a general thing about Obama and politics. I think his politics, his ideology, and his policies hide in plain sight. I don't think that there was anything secretive about the way he campaigned, or that he has a secret ideology, as the right wing obviously believes, or that he has a secret birthplace, or anything like that. During the campaign, the Obama that I heard was the Obama that recognized that by being in Afghanistan, we have presented ourselves with a series of complexities that have only gotten worse and worse and worse since he's president.
Right.
I honestly, as a citizen, as a journalist, I don't see any good ending to this. I only see horrible outcomes no matter what the choice is taken. I have enormous sympathy for his dilemma there, because he started there. And the roots of this, unlike Iraq, don't come from a fantasy. They come from, or an ideological thrust. They come from 9/11 and an attack and an accumulating set of circumstances. All the difficulties we know, a horrible ally, all kinds of factors in Afghanistan that we have to deal with. But I don't see what the good choice is there in the immediate sense. My inclination is to say enough is enough, but there are very smart people on the ground, and I don't mean just militarists and conservatives and the right wing somehow of either party, that acknowledge that there are very bad outcomes with a precipitous withdrawal. Right. I may not share that point of view, but I just don't see it as an easy and cut and dried issue.
No. I don't know if you were, I was a little surprised, and I was wondering if you were surprised that one of the first things that Obama promised after he took office was to, quote, close Guantanamo. And I wondered if, how important do you think that is to him? And obviously it hasn't happened yet.
Not important enough. Not important enough, and I find it disappointing at the very least. It's one of any number of things that I find disappointing about Obama. I find Obama's failure to make a greater issue of all kinds of human rights issues around the world disappointing. Well, any number of things, but I think the spectacle of a sardonic Dick Cheney on the Today Show saying, "You see, he had to come along," was really really regrettable.
Yeah. I've talked to a number of people in the corporate world who were distressed that Obama didn't have any CEOs in his first cabinet, and that was obviously a huge change from previous, both from the Bush administration and from the Clinton administration. And I was wondering if you thought that was a mistake, given what he had to deal with in his first 2 years.
I have to say the people who feel underrepresented in the economic policy making of the United States do not seem to me to be investment bankers and CEOs.
Right.
I think those interests are pretty well taken care of. I think for whatever you think of Geithner or Summers or the rest of the economic team or Obama himself, I don't think those interests were ignored. Those people were rescued. And I think the collapse of huge investment banks across the board, by the way, would have been a disaster. I think the people in America who feel underrepresented, who are angry, who are upset, and who are suffering are the unemployed, people in the middle class who are at best in stagnant shape, and many of them are worse, people who are graduating from college and who are taking on jobs that they never would have imagined they'd be in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, people who've had their houses foreclosed. I find this so-called rage among CEOs that the business class feels somehow ignored or betrayed, comical.
Right.
Comical. And when one of the wealthiest people in the city, whose business and whose interests have been more or less rescued by the efforts of the administration in the last 2 years, can go in front of a private board meeting and say that somehow even the consideration of raising the tax on private equity business is somehow akin to Nazi behavior before Czechoslovakia, I refer to the famous quote of Steve Schwarzman, is just sad. It's just very sad. So whether Bill Daley will be a better or worse chief of staff, and whether he brings in CEOs to meetings and those voices are heard in a more pronounced way, we'll see. But I find this rage among some people in the business class confusing.
I agree with you, but for that reason did you see his opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal today, Obama's, in which he bends over backwards to assure the business world that the regulatory reform he's planning is for the benefit of the business world. Did you think he was...
I think he's going to run for president again, right. And I think people who run for president again need money to do so.
Right.
Again, this is not... Look, the most radical thing about Barack Obama is one thing. He's an African-American who became president of the United States. That is radical. That's historically radical. Beyond that, I feel he's a man of the center-left.
Right.
And I don't think anybody farther left is going to get elected president of the United States. A lot of what he's done, a lot of what he stands for, I am extremely happy with, satisfied with, some not. But the notion that somehow he is taken in some a radical and is going to upset the balance of the way money operates in politics, first of all, I don't think he could if he wanted to. He's going to run for... I also think he'll probably be reelected.
Do you?
I do.